In my Realm Reborn analysis, I said that the lead up to and ending of A Realm Reborn's patch story was one of the best moments in the entire game. And while I stand by that statement, I do have to make the caveat that the follow-up of the Bloody Banquet in Heavensward retroactively makes that moment worse. It also had an overall negative effect on climactic story moments in subsequent expansions. But before we look into the effects of this storyline, let's go over why it happened to begin with. If you followed any of the interviews or behind the scenes of 14, you know that Game of Thrones has been an inspiration to the developers, even carrying over into Final Fantasy XVI's story. This inspiration can be traced all the way back to the patch content of A Realm Reborn, when the future of the game was still on very shaky ground. A time when the devs weren't even sure if the game was going to continue into or past its first expansion. It was at this time that Game of Thrones was at the height of its popularity, and it's no surprise that a writing team in need of quick inspiration found it in a readily available source. And what was it that made Game of Thrones so popular? In a word,
consequences.
There was no plot armor. Anyone could die at any point. Good people did not come out on top through their virtue, but instead were preyed upon by more cunning players in a ruthless game of political maneuvering. With a healthy dose of subversion and gray morality to add uncertainty to the narrative, audiences stayed engaged for those first few seasons, and the 14 team proved eager to emulate that brand of storytelling. But I think it would be a bit simplistic to attribute the entirety of the Realm Reborn patch storylines to inspiration. Because while in the long run the Bloody Banquet did hurt 14 in ways we will get into later, it also helped alleviate some problems that had begun forming in the base game. You see, A Realm Reborn was in danger, and the first few patches were helping to march the main story towards a slow but sure decline. The danger? Predictability. I said before that one thing I enjoyed about A Realm Reborn was how quaint the story felt. But another word for quaint is formulaic. A Realm Reborn shows us the entire story of the base game in the opening sequence. We face off against an Ascian, a warrior of light against an agent of darkness, and we win. That is what you, the player, should expect, and that is exactly what you receive. Now, it is by no means a bad thing to meet the audience's expectations. You want to provide what you promise at the beginning of a story. But giving people exactly what they think they will receive, nothing more and nothing less, removes tension and excitement for what comes next. The story becomes stale and formulaic, and the patches needed to address this problem before too many people checked out of the story altogether. The writers, I think, understood this. So they began with the forming of the Crystal Braves in patch 2.3. A neutral military faction born of idealistic hopes of unity. In a world that is so far stuck to the good guy wins trope, this seemed like a logical next step for the established good guys. 14 is and always has been an optimistic story. Our enemies are often setbacks to creating a peaceful world. They are clearly in the wrong and we are clearly in the right, as simple tales often are, and we face no difficulty in choosing to beat down those who oppose our ideals, at least in the early game. Narratively, the Crystal Braves are introduced to serve as a symbol of the naivete of not just Alphino, but all of the Scions. They are also a nod to the meta-narrative, a crystallization, if you will, of the expectations the players have for the story. On the surface, it appears that everything will work out fine because so far in the game, everything has worked out fine for our heroes, even if there are some few setbacks. After the Crystal Braves, we are introduced to Iceheart and Ivy. Iceheart not only firmly believes she is in the right and her cause is the righteous one, but also calls out the Warrior of Light for blindly following those in authority. While her role is antagonistic, she is not without reason or an ability to compromise, and she even appeals to our connection with Hydaelyn. This hints to the player that we are no longer simply the good guys fighting the bad guys. There is nuance here, and we are left to question both her true motives and our role in Ishgard's conflict with her, which will be paid off later. Equally nuanced is Ivy's story. Her narrative serves two purposes. The first is to set up dramatic irony, as the Crystal Braves dispatch justice as the good guys, and Ilbert specifically calls out Ivy for her lack of loyalty and care for others. The second purpose is to confront Alphino's idealism, the same idealism that led to the creation of the Crystal Braves. Both of these purposes add layers to our implicit understanding of the world of Eorzea, taking it from a rather black and white narrative with sprinklings of gray here and there, to a world that confronts its heroes with the complexity of their moral decisions. Ivy is surely in the wrong, there is no question of that, but that does not immediately place us in the right, the way it would have in the base game with the Ascians and the Empire. In the background, as these events unfold, we are also given hints about the political tensions rising within Ul'dah. We, the audience, see the underlying conflict between the royalists and monetarists, and Nanamo's powerlessness against her more shrewd and conniving opponents. Nanamo is one of the good guys. She is optimistic and in many ways idealistic, like the Scions, and while this served her in the base game, it will no longer be enough as the story expands its scope. Moonbreeda's introduction and subsequent death also hints at the deepening complexity of the narrative. There are consequences now, and we cannot be assured that victory will come easily or without cost. It is with all of these threads, all of these hints, that the Crystal Brave storyline culminates at the Bloody Banquet. It is the consequence of unfettered idealism and an assumption that working towards the good of all is enough. I've seen a few people comment that they hated the finale of A Realm Reborn's patch story, that they couldn't believe anyone would be dense enough not to see this ending coming a mile off. But that's the point, isn't it? The point is the Scions were naive. Alphino takes the brunt of the blame, both in-universe and out, but really all of the Scions bear some of the blame for allowing him to go forward with such plans unimpeded and without oversight. They too believed that a pure desire to improve the world would keep the whole ship from capsizing. And this time, it didn't. The whole storyline is basically the writers holding up a sign saying, hey, you know how this was a simple good versus evil story and the good guy wins? Yeah, not anymore. This time, you lose. And that was what made it appealing to a lot of people. Okay, so that's good, right? Then how does this storyline hurt 14 if it positively changed the way people view the narrative? Well, it all comes back to that word, consequences. You see, a twist or climax is only as powerful as what comes after. You can have the best lead-up in the world, the most perfect series of events that all weave together into a finale that meets and exceeds the audience's expectations, and it will mean nothing if the consequences of those decisions do not follow. Take The Lord of the Rings as an example. If, at the end of Return of the King, Frodo returns home and has a pleasant and peaceful life, gets married, has a few kids, and sometimes talks about his journey to Mordor the way Bilbo talks about his adventures with the dwarves, it would retroactively make that journey less meaningful. While there are no doubt many people that will be happy Frodo can successfully move on from his ordeals, it is in no way a realistic consequence. The story itself would be less impactful because the effect does not follow logically from the conflict that has been previously set up. Frodo must suffer from wearing the ring because that is the only way to show clearly what it meant to carry it. The same is true for the Bloody Banquet. We are told through the narrative that the banquet is the tipping point in a cold war between the monetarists and the royalists. We are told that the Crystal Braves are corrupt and have been bought out by Teleji. We are told that the Scions are paying the cost for their trust in others. So we have an amazing climax with all these moving parts coming together in a satisfying answer to a mystery that has been building behind the scenes, and we are itching to see how our protagonists will fix this huge mess they're in. What will the fallout be? How will this change the political landscape of Eorzea? What will we have to do to fix the reputation of the Scions and clear the Warrior of Light's name? Will we be banished from Ul'dah and maybe Eorzea itself forever? Oh no, you can just go there. Whenever. Okay. You would expect that Ul'dah would fall into chaos following the murder of its leader, but it doesn't. You would expect to be hunted by the Braves or need to take on the job of dismantling them yourself, but you don't. You would expect to lose some of the scions. Nope, they're all still alive after that, although with some superficial consequences in the form of Ystola's eyesight and Thancred's loss of aether manipulation, neither of which ever seriously affect their ability to participate in the narrative. Also, Thancred's partial blindness was later retconned, so there's that too. You see, 14 has one fatal flaw. It's a story-driven MMO. A live game is often limited in its story options because there are too many variables to account for with large-scale changes. For instance, should players be locked out of entire city hubs or areas because they've reached a certain point in the story? Should NPCs react to a player's presence based on where they are in the narrative? That would mean writing new dialogue and scenarios for dozens, if not hundreds, of minor characters for the sake of consistency. Should main cast members that serve in multiple quest lines be killed off? How will that affect player retention? It's not like a one-and-done story where you can do crazy things that best serve the narrative. You have to think about the fact that if you kill off a beloved character, people will stop playing, and that will affect your future revenue. In the end, the story that they would have to tell in 14 following the Bloody Banquet was too large in scope and too risky. The first expansion was set in Ishgard and contained its own story, which was likely being written, or at least planned, before the Bloody Banquet itself. It was probably not immediately apparent that the story team had gotten themselves into a bit of a mess. Dealing with the fallout of the banquet would be an undertaking that would require a lot of time that would be taken away from the Ishgard story, which was itself already multifaceted with several concurrent storylines. With limited resources at their disposal to deal with the consequences of the banquet, they instead decided to carefully pick up all of the pieces on the board and put them right back where they started. They set up Lolorito as the real mastermind behind the scenes, halted Ralbon's character arc before it could really get started, slowly brought back all of the scions one by one, largely defanged the Crystal Braves, and even unmurdered Nanamo to put her back on her throne and return Ul'dah to its status quo. It was perhaps the best decision from a development point of view, but in the realm of storytelling it was a huge disappointment, and it created a new set of problems. Because now, no matter what happens in the story, no matter what crazy twists or character deaths we see in front of us, there will always be a little voice in the back of your head saying, "But the Bloody Banquet. But Nanamo." We have lost our trust in the story to fully commit to the consequences of characters' actions. Admittedly, the way they walked the changes back was quite good, and you can find a lot of people defending Lolorito's character as a smart move that makes sense in universe. And Horshafont's very real, very final death also helps with regaining some of that lost trust. Although Ystola's rescue from the livestream almost immediately afterwards put a damper on that as well. I don't want to get too deep into spoiler territory, but there are other characters who have died on screen that people were unwilling to believe were really dead until there was definitive proof. If you know, you know. I don't think I need to explain why this is extremely bad for immersion. If a story does not stick to its guns in one area, people will expect a similar lack of consequences elsewhere. This reduces the impact of tension, conflict, sacrifice, and even character growth. Luckily, CBU3 is a team that learns from its mistakes. I think they've tried, and mostly succeeded, in rebuilding much of the narrative trust that was damaged by the Bloody Banquet. The lessons learned by the characters, that they cannot remain naively optimistic, has been reiterated multiple times since then to great effect. The Scions retain their hopes for a peaceful world, but now it is tempered with the wisdom of experience. It is no longer easy for the good guys to win, and they don't expect it to be. This growth is probably the best thing that came out of the Realm Reborn finale. And for the record, they have walked back other later story decisions in a similar way, but nothing on the same scale as the Bloody Banquet. I think some retconning and drop storylines are inevitable in a continuing story like 14. It's just how much and how often that's important. At the end of the day, while the Bloody Banquet may have hurt the story, it didn't kill it. It was more of a flesh wound that annoys you every once in a while. And as far as Japanese media goes, 14 commits to consequences far more than many of its counterparts that operate on the rule of cool, a method of storytelling that focuses on excitement in the moment over strict rules of logic. Whether you prefer one over the other is, of course, subjective and up to the individual. I just personally prefer the latter. With that being said, what did you think of the Bloody Banquet and the follow-up in Heavensward? Were you disappointed? Unbothered? Do you feel it affected your enjoyment of the story that followed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, so do please share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.